Now, here's a shocker for you. The French government has warned it could cut electricity supplies to the island of Jersey amid an escalating row over post-Brexit fishing rights. Maritime Minister Annick Jardin, who is today's plank of the week, by the way, latest episode out now, starring, of course, Mike Graham, Emily Carver, and yours truly. But the Maritime Minister of France has said to their parliament that new rules governing access to the Channel Island waters were unacceptable. I'm sorry it's come to this, but we will have to cut electricity supplies if we need to. Jersey, the largest of the Channel Islands, receives 95% of its electricity through 3 underwater cables from France. I wouldn't expect this behaviour from Iran or from Russia or from China. But it's being done by France. How can we stop it? Let's speak to Andrew Allison, head of the Freedom Association and founder of the pro-Brexit group Better Off Out. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Mark.
What a well-named group that latter one is.
Yes, it rather does what it says on the tin, doesn't it?
I mean, are the French seriously considering getting an enormous pair of scissors and just chopping the cable that supplies electricity from France to Jersey?
Well, I couldn't quite believe the story because it sounds utterly preposterous and ridiculous. And of course, I mean, listening to an interview earlier with a journalist from Jersey, the contract is between the island of Jersey and EDF, the French electricity company. So I can't see how the French government can just interfere in a private contract and just, as you say, cut the wires.
It just reminds me, Andrew, and we had you on the show at the time, it reminds me of when the European Commission threatened to erect a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland over supplies of AstraZeneca vaccine into the EU.
Yeah, it is a sort of
the same playbook,
thing,
isn't it? I mean, you could call it Trumpian.
You could call it Trump, you could just call it plain stupid, which I think is what it should be called. But it's not just this maritime minister, who probably isn't a household name in her own household. The Department of La Manche, closest to the island of Jersey, they've got ministers saying the same sort of things. Oh, we don't want to do this. It will be with great regret, but it is very tempting. I mean, utter nonsense. And this is no way to resolve a dispute.
No, and the whole point about the deal that the Prime Minister negotiated with the EU at the beginning of course, the last year was that, it was a fantastic. This year, of course, we had Freedom Day. Because of the pandemic, it's held one day from another. But the bottom line is we're out. We've got a zero tariff, zero quota free trade agreement. But the fishing aspect was bound to involve pragmatism and negotiations on both sides, and it always will. And what we're seeing here is bully boy tactics.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, British fishermen are not particularly happy about the deal, but they don't go around behaving like this. But the French have form on this, don't they, Mark? I mean, we've seen blockades of Calais before, and different ports. I mean, if you look at the demonstrations that were in Paris and right across France a couple of years ago, the Gilets jaunes protests, the French police were brutal with some of those protesters. And if you watch some of those images, so the French just have a habit of just going over the top. And if you saw her speech to the Assemblée Nationale, this maritime minister, he had all the Gallic flair that you can imagine. And I just think it's grandstanding, but it is bully boy tactics. And I don't think it's going to happen.
But it shows that you just can't do business with these people, and it is therefore lucky that we're out.
I totally agree. People on the continent genuinely can't understand why Britain voted to leave the EU. It's something that they just cannot comprehend at all. But you voted for Remain, Mark, didn't you, in 2016? But you can sort of understand now why so many of us.
Well, can I be honest with you, Andrew? I'm a bit weird because I accepted the result straight away. So,
yes.
That places me in a minority in the Remain community. But I've certainly got buyer's regret. But I mean, it's a huge concern. And actually, you could argue it's a good news story because it is very clear now that the UK and territories like Jersey are able to flex their muscles and actually say these are our waters and here's how many fish you collect and here's what you can do with your boats. That's what Brexit is.
That's right. And of course, there's a British.
And they don't like it up 'em.
Well, no, they don't. They don't, Mr. Mannering. They really don't. But as a British protectorate, the UK will defend Jersey and will defend Jersey's defence and security. So it's almost like a declaration of war, isn't it? It's the sort of thing you would do in a wartime sort of situation. Right, we're going to invade this country. We're going to declare war on that country. Oh, we've got control of the gas pipeline or the electricity cables. Let's turn them all off. This is the sort of thing that you would expect in a wartime situation.
Well, can you imagine if the previous president, Donald Trump, had made a threat like that he was going to close off electricity supplies to Canada? I mean, the media would have gone into meltdown. Whereas actually looking at the papers today, it's not really that much of a big story, hasn't raised an eyebrow.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? But you are right about Donald Trump, because if he'd suggested something like that, all hell would have broken loose right across the world. There'd have been headlines everywhere across the world. But President Macron, I mean, some of his threats have been particularly unpleasant, and yet he doesn't seem to get any flack for it. So it just shows the double standards in some parts of the media.
Let's talk about Michel Barnier, whose memoirs are out. I'm sure you're halfway through them already, Andrew. The diaries.
Well, I've read a report in the newspaper.
Yeah, well, that'll do you. I'm amazed you're still awake. The diaries are called The Great Illusion. Tory quarrels determine the UK's post-Brexit future, says Michel Barnier. What's your assessment of his comments?
Well, I go back to what I said. People on the continent don't understand why people in the UK voted in great numbers to leave the European Union. The Eurosceptic movement on the left of British politics has been going for about 50 years. We're talking about people like Tony Benn and Peter Shaw.
Yeah,
great orators and great statesmen of the left of British politics. If you look at the referendum, I work closely with Brendan Chilton, who often appears on this radio station.
Yeah, good guy, Labour future, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then he was General Secretary of Labour Leave, and we helped get leaflets out right across the country, because we always knew that if we carried that very strong Eurosceptic voice from the left, we would get over the line, and that's exactly what we did. We carried huge cities, places like Hull, for example. I think parts of Lincolnshire and Essex, I mean, it was almost, well, you couldn't find a Remain voter, really. No one who would actually admit to it. So, it's just Michel Barnier not quite understanding. I've been to UKIP conferences in the past when there were, a major force. And you will find loads of people from the left there. It wasn't just sort of disaffected Tories. There were loads of people from the left.
Well, of course, there's one positive. If it gets labelled a Tory Brexit and it's a success, that will be great news for the Conservatives. And it might be tomorrow with that poll in Hartlepool, which is a very Brexit-supporting constituency, even now.
It certainly is. And I think the Conservatives could have won that at the 2019 general election if it hadn't been for the Brexit party sort of standing at the same time. Now, I do believe in free and fair elections, so I'm not criticising anyone for standing. They have a right to do so. But looking at the polling, it's looking very good. And same for the Tees Valley mayor. That looks like it's going to, Ben Houchen's going to increase his majority if polls are to be believed. And it looks like Andy Street in the West Midlands, could still hold on. So it's not looking very good for Sir Keir. But of course, we've got to remember that Keir Starmer was the architect of Labour's Brexit policy. It was a complete and utter disaster at the 2019 general election. And so is it hardly surprising that he is not the man to try and revive Labour's fortunes around the country?
Well, indeed, we'll certainly watch those results with great interest tomorrow. Final thought, Andrew, we must take seriously any teething problems when it comes to the post-Brexit agreement. And I have spoken to fishermen on this show who aren't happy. They feel that they've got to wait perhaps upwards of 5 years before the full benefit of what Brexit brings will benefit them directly. So do you think the government needs to be mindful of any downside impacts of Brexit on our economy?
Yes, of course they have to. The fishermen, I think, have a very justifiable case. Although I will add a caveat to that, and that as our fishing fleet is not very big these days, hasn't been for a lot of years, we do have to train new fishermen, obviously buy new ships, new boats. So all of that is going to be a work in progress, and I hope the government is going to help in that. But as I mentioned to you 2 or 3 weeks ago, Mark, the main victims of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal have been fishermen and have been people in Northern Ireland.
After this, we've got Hartlepool FAQs. Andrew, let's speak soon. Thank you very much for your time. Andrew Allison is head of the Freedom Association and the founder of the pro-Brexit group Better Off Out. Keep it